file, sir.
Thank you, Corporal. Have a few. So you're going to make our film for us?
Sure.
Well, it's not going to be an easy job. I think you know everybody here, Mr. Garland, Captain Roberts, who will be our military supervisor, and Mr. Williams of the Army Kinematograph Corporation.
Yes, indeed. I've had the general idea explained to me by Mr. Williams.
That's fine.
I've put Mr. Garland in the picture, sir, and I've told him that what we want is a film to be used for the instruction of newly commissioned RE officers and recruits during the early days of training. We want to put over the purpose of RE training by showing the jobs they have to do in war.
Good. That's it exactly. I've talked it over with the Brigadier, and we've decided to show some of the tasks that were carried out during this last war. You see, equipment and methods may change, but the tasks are pretty certain to remain the same.
I see. Then you'd prefer to use a good deal of film actually shot during battle.
Exactly. And that's where you come in, John. You'll have to dig out the stuff.
Well, as a matter of fact, I've got most of it downstairs in the theatre. I thought we might like to have a look at it today.
Yes, we will, John. I want to include the real thing whenever possible. Then the sapper will be able to see what his training is leading up to.
Fine. Now, before we go any further, will you give me a rough idea of what the engineers actually do and how it's all organized?
Certainly. I've had a chart prepared, Garland. It shows in a very simplified way the sort of RE units one would find in the various areas in a typical theatre of operations. Say, in almost any part of the world. Ah, thank you, Corporal. Come round here, Garland.
I say, that's very nice.
Here is a complete theatre occupied by an army based on a port. In front, we have the fighting area, comprising the divisions, corps, and army. At the back, we have the port and base area. Between the fighting area and the base port, we have the lines of communication. These may extend for hundreds of miles. Now, in the divisional area, you'd find the divisional engineers. They're commanded by the Commander, Royal Engineers, commonly called the CRE. He has under his command the Field Engineer Regiment, made up of 3 field squadrons and a field park squadron with a bridging troop of its own. They're the first engineers on the scene in battle. In an advance, they gap minefields and deal with booby traps. They build rafts for ferrying, carry out demolitions, and road repairs. They construct plane strips, build bridges, and construct and operate water points. When attacking strong defenses, they're assisted by the armored RE.
But in a withdrawal, they lay mines, carry out demolitions, and in fact do the same jobs, but in reverse, as it were. The task being to delay the enemy.
Now, in the corps area, the corps troops are commanded by the corps commander, Royal Engineers. He has under him 2 field engineer regiments. They assist the divisional engineers when required. Their main tasks are building and improving bridges and roads, making the fullest possible use of heavy plant, and constructing plane strips. Minor tasks are water supply and bridging dumps in the corps area. In Army area, the chief engineer has under his command a number of Army engineer regiments. They assist the corps engineers when required, but their main tasks are building permanent bridges and constructing permanent airfields for the RAF. They improve or rebuild main roads to take the vast volume of traffic required by the Army. Army roadhead will also be found in this area. The chief engineer also has squadrons to run stores and bridging dumps and has parks for heavy plant. He has an armored engineer regiment for assisting the divisional engineers in big attacks. In addition, in the Army area, LFC area, and base area, you have all sorts of specialist units which do specialist jobs just wherever they're wanted. Sometimes up forward, sometimes right back. It just depends. There are survey squadrons, construction squadrons, who build camps, hospitals, etc. There are railway construction and railway operating squadrons, tunneling squadrons, well-boring troops who increase water supplies, and electrical and mechanical squadrons who run power stations and lay petrol pipelines and so on. There are forestry squadrons, railway maintenance squadrons, engineer base workshops, inland water transport units, quarrying units who supply stone and gravel, engineer stores, base depots, and of course, bomb disposal units.
All these units improve and increase communications by rebuilding bridges, repairing roads and railways. In fact, generally, the sapper's task is to make the battle easier for our own fighting troops and harder for the enemy's. Also, to facilitate the movement and living conditions of our troops and the storage of equipment.
Lastly, at the coast is your port area. Mind you, many of the units and installations you've just seen may be found down here as well. Normally, you'll find here the port construction, port operating, and port maintenance units.
That's only a sketchy idea of what we do. And in addition, there are airborne and parachute units who do exactly the same job for the airborne troops as the divisional engineers. In fact, whenever there's an engineering job, there's an RE unit to do it. Hence the core motto, ubique, everywhere. That's a point I'd very much like you to make.
Yes. And I think a very important one. Well now, that's given me a very good working idea of the general layout. When can I see this existing film material that you mentioned?
Didn't you say you had some of the film here in the theatre, John?
Yes, it's all ready.
Oh, good, we'll go and see it now then. You ready, gentlemen?
Yes?
I lead the way, Garland. You got the file, John?
Yes, it's here.
Now, Mr. Garland, will you sit here?
Yeah.
Williams,
Excuse me, right?
give them the chart, John.
Sure.
Now, what's the form?
Well, before we start, sir, I think I'd better explain. I've had the material assembled roughly in some sort of order corresponding with your chart. The scenes will show the work of the various engineer units in each area. We start at a landing and work forward, using film shot in all theaters of war in order to illustrate as many engineer tasks as possible. It's not meant to be any particular campaign. In fact, it's bits taken from all over the place, frequently under battle conditions. So the quality is pretty poor at times.
It's all joined up, is it?
Well, most of it, sir, but of course the editing and selection of shots will be up to Mr. Garland.
Good. Well, now you better give us a running commentary and tell us what it's all about.
Right, sir.
Where's this, for instance, John?
This is to illustrate the very start of a campaign, sir. Actually, D-Day in Normandy. In the assault of these beaches, the sapper's task was to get the infantry and armor through the first belt of obstacles to grab the bridgehead. This sequence shows what some of these obstacles looked like. There were mines to be cleared, booby traps to be destroyed, and a host of steel obstacles had to be removed before clear lanes could be established to allow the infantry and their supporting arms to move inland. All this beach clearance took place under heavy enemy fire. As soon as the bridgehead had been established, the infantry and armor moved inland, taking their normal sappers with them. While the fighting moves on, we'll consider the tasks of the RE units in the port and base areas. At the earliest possible moment, the port construction units got busy. Here you see one of their surveyors at work making a final recce of the beach in readiness for Mulberry. This was the great artificial harbour, which was prefabricated in England and then towed over to Normandy by men of the Royal Navy and Royal Engineers. These huge caissons were maneuvered into position, sunk, and assembled by the sappers, who completed this gigantic task in extremely short time under the most adverse conditions. enabling thousands of tons of equipment, vehicles and stores to be fed forward to the divisions needing them in the fighting line. In other theatres of war, port construction and maintenance units had to deal with harbours and port installations which had been heavily bombed by the RAF or disorganized by the enemy. Here are heavy plant, vehicles and stores being offloaded by the sappers.
Ah, good. Borneo, isn't it? I want to show that the sapper's task is much the same, no matter what the theatre. This landing, too, was a combined operation, and the sappers were the first troops to land. In this case, they were, of course, Australians. They went in to clear the beach obstacles under cover of a smoke screen. The landing took place in the spring of 1945.
Now, in any theatre, while the main forces advance inland and the beachhead is being consolidated, the engineers get busy clearing up the streets and making new roads, so that the MT taking stores and ammunition to the forward troops can make a quick turnaround. We'll see more of the forward troops later on. In towns, narrow streets have to be widened and sharp corners improved. This dozer operator is clearing to a flat surface, a much more tricky job than it looks. Unsafe buildings have to be demolished. For all these jobs, heavy plant is very useful. This is the sort of thing a tractor can do in minutes where manual labor would take hours. Here now are sappers on bomb disposal. The troop officer first of all makes a thorough recce of the bombed building. He indicates to his sergeant the parts of the building that will have to be shored up or removed to make it safe for the sappers who are to dispose of the bomb. The staircase, for example, will have to be chopped down. The shoring is all done by sapper carpenters who are afterwards responsible for the timbering of the shaft down to the bomb. Pneumatic tools are used as long as possible, but when their vibration is likely to set off the bomb, the sappers continue by digging with picks and shovels. The officer stands by with his instruments to see if a delay action fuse is still ticking. This is an enemy bomb, but when a rapid advance has been made, the bomb disposal men have to deal with unexploded bombs dropped by our own Air Force. As a secondary role, they have to lift mines and booby traps in the base and LFC areas. Now, one of the first jobs in any operation of this sort is the construction of airfields in the bridgehead and the repair of captured aerodromes. This is carried out by Army engineer regiments. They, of course, do this right up forward as well. While a certain amount of work can be done by hand, the use of heavy plant greatly speeds up matters. Here you see typical examples: dozers, auto patrols, rollers, and so on. Now here's an electrical and mechanical squadron at work, laying pipelines. This pipeline pumped petrol straight from England to France, and later on right up to the Rhine. The erection of these large storage tanks was also part of their work. On a job like this, there's plenty of scope for the tradesmen: plumbers, boilermakers, riveters, fitters, and so on. See how the tanks are being camouflaged from the air. This is an engineer base workshop. And here again, the craftsman with an engineering knowledge comes into his own. Blacksmiths, machinists, fitters, turners, carpenters and joiners, etc. Now here is an engineer store's base depot in Brussels. Here they keep all the engineer stores and equipment required by an army, and you'd be surprised how much that is. It's sited close to road, rail and waterways so that a quick turnaround can be effected. The Sapper task here is the receipt, storage, maintenance and issue of engineer stores. From the largest, which are easy to identify, to the small ones, which are not so much in evidence. Look at this huge stack of pontoons and those other bridging parts in the foreground. There's enough equipment here for several miles of bridge. And behind the scenes is the inevitable sapper, keeping the equipment in first-class condition. This chap's repairing a damaged folding boat. He seems to be making a pretty good job of it, too. From there we go to a park for heavy plant. Again, it's a job of receipt, maintenance and issue. But in this instance, the sappers are concerned with dozers, tippers and the multitude of other earth-moving plant used in the RE. This park was also located in Belgium. Well, now we move forward from base to LFC area. That's lines of communications, Mr. Garner.
Yes, I see.
That's right. We've shown some of the main jobs that would be happening in port and base areas. Construction and operating of a port, laying petrol pipelines, what a big stores looks like, roads, a never-ending task, and some of the uses of heavy plant. There'll also be a tremendous amount of accommodation work for housing men and stores, and also railway construction. Now, we're going to have a look at some of the work which might be going on in the LFC. Oh, here's something you're sure to find, no matter what the theatre of operations. A construction squadron building a camp or hospital. The man in charge here is the garrison engineer, who with his foreman of work supervises all building construction. Among the garrison engineer's other key men are military mechanists, who deal with electrical and mechanical problems. It's their job to see that essential services such as electric supplies are maintained. Here you see a mechanist sergeant major checking up at a power station, while a mechanist staff sergeant sees that all is in order at the local waterworks. Well, next we have a whole batch of material on communications in general.
Yes, that's good. One of the most important tasks in the LFC is to keep open communications by rail and road. This means a great deal of repair, maintenance and construction. The amount of MT in an army is enormous. And you never seem to have enough road space for it. Tanks, transporters, and other very heavy loads soon tear all but the best surfaces to pieces.
This is the construction of a bypass. They have to be built to prevent traffic congestion in badly bombed towns or towns with narrow streets. Here again, heavy plant is used a lot and greatly speeds up work. Dozers, graders, diggers, and tippers are all skillfully used by sapper operators to their best advantage. Traffic will soon be pouring over this new route. When stone, chippings and other road materials are needed, quarrying squadrons go to work to provide them. Here are sappers charging the hopper of a stone crusher to produce small chippings for top coats in road work. And here's the finished product being wheeled away from the far end.
Ah, that must be Eisenhower.
Yes, it's the Supreme Commander watching the sappers building a corduroy road with timber supplied by a forestry squadron. This road was made in the Reichswald forest in Germany in 1945. Whole divisions were being supplied down routes which were little more than tracks. Forestry units also supplied timber for bridging and other purposes. These scenes were taken in Burma in 1944 and show Indian engineers at work. In this case, timber was being prepared for boats in which to ferry the Chinwin. Elephants take the place of dozers here to drag the timber to the mill. Some is prepared by hand, and the rest goes to the sawmill, where circular saws cut it into balks and planks of the required size. Those are the keel sections of the boats going down now. Afterwards, the ribs are built up and the outer timbers spiked on. Some of the work here is being done by natives under the supervision of the Indian engineers. This shows a whole beach full of boats in various stages of construction. Now here we have some material showing a Canadian forestry squadron at work in Holland in the winter of 1944.
I'm glad to see you've quite a few shots of Dominion and other troops, John. You see, we sappers regard ourselves as an empire-wide trade union.
Now this timber is being used for bridging in the LFC area. The unit that's doing it is an Army Engineer Regiment. We don't always use Bailey or other unit construction bridges. This is a timber pile bridge with steel road bearers. The piles are driven by mechanical means. When fully driven, carpenters cut off the tops with petrol-driven saws. There's more work for them when the decking is being laid. This shows how necessary the good craftsman is in the field as well as the LFC unit. Here's another carpenter boring the holes to secure the wheel guides to the decking. While down at water level, a sapper is fixing bracing to the piles. This bridge was demolished by the enemy. We frequently got to make good this sort of thing, and often it's much worse, since here the infantry are able to get across. Whenever possible, diversions must be found or made to avoid large-scale obstructions. Here, speed is vital. This diversion was made by South African sappers in Tunisia. They are usually made in the forefront of the battle. This is a Class 40 Bailey Bridge at Caen. It was built by divisional troops. Notice what a thorough demolition the enemy has done to the old bridge. This second bridge was built when the fighting moved on. The area then came into Army, and later into the LFC area. One bridge then took the traffic going forward to the corps and divisions, and the other, the traffic going back to base area. The transportation branch of the RE, among other tasks, repair, construct, and operate railways. Before the enemy moves out of an area, he destroys everything he can, leaving shattered rolling stock and torn-up tracks for the railway troops to make good. These sappers are laying new tracks. Heavy plant levels the ground to a true surface. All the RE railway troops go through a course at the RE Railway Training Centre in England before joining a unit in the field. There are plate layers, wagon builders, shunters, engine drivers, and numerous other trades. In fact, they can operate a complete railway system just like one of the big railway companies at home in England. Now we come to a job of improvisation done by the Indian railway troops. They're getting a railway system going again, using jeeps instead of locomotives. One of the most interesting aspects of the life of a sapper is that he's always being called on to improvise and use whatever stores and materials are readily available to do the job in hand. This is a very good example of that adaptability of his. Australian engineers also constructed and ran a jeep railway in Borneo. Well now, you've seen some jobs happening in the LFC.
That's, yeah.
The construction of roads, railways and camps, quarrying, forestry, some heavy bridging and the clearing up of debris. The next scenes are taken in the Army and Corps areas. Some of the units shown have come up forward from areas further back and are now working under Corps and Army.
Have you got it, Ronnie?
Yes, thanks.
Okay, John, carry on.
Well, here's another RE unit you might easily run into in Corps area. A survey squadron. Survey holds some of the most highly technical craftsmen in the Army, and their trades are numerous. This chap's preparing a map from an aerial survey. In the field, one of survey's most important jobs is the preparation of defense overprints. I don't know if you'd like to explain that to Mr. Garland, sir.
They overprint onto ordinary survey maps the layout of enemy positions from information served up by intelligence. Shows where the enemy is, strong points, guns, tank obstacles, minefields, and so on, for the benefit of the units about to attack them. That's photographic reproduction of the block they've made. This is a mobile printer at work. Here's one of the finished overprinted maps coming off the machine. It's got all the enemy positions marked on it, right up to date.
This airfield is under construction in the core area. It's much further forward than the last one you saw. Sappers with their dozers clear trees and brushwood. The ground is leveled off with other heavy plant, and in very quick time, the first plane comes into land. Earlier, the colonel explained that the job of the corps troops was to improve and increase road communications as fast as possible. Well, this is the sort of thing he meant. Constructing a large bailey on crib piers and clearing up the debris of the blown bridge. It's two-way and built on a German autobahn. Notice the jobs of the individual sappers. One is screwing up a roller, another tightening up cross-bracing on a pier, and others are lowering panels using blocks and tackles. You see the second bridge being launched in these shots. It looks like this from the roadway when completed. Next, we have a very good example of a large Bailey pontoon bridge. It was built in December 44 over the Chindwin in Burma. That's the shore landing bay being boomed forward. This raft is being rowed into bridge. The far landing bay is launched. A final checkup is made. The name is fixed up, and over go the first vehicles. From above, we get a very good idea of its length, which, by the way, was 1,150 feet. This bridge was built over the River Po in Italy in 1945. It's a semi-permanent bridge built by South African sappers who were also responsible for designing it. The Chief Engineer, 8th Army, is seen here opening the bridge for traffic. Canal clearance was a major task for all sorts of units in Germany. These shots are typical of the sort of thing that happened. Not only were bridges demolished, but the canal banks too were blown in. The sappers had to cut up and withdraw from the canal beds hundreds of these bridges. They used mechanical equipment and AVRIs. They're Assault Vehicles Royal Engineers. You can see this one dragging out a piece of a bridge. Divers were used. This one, he's a sapper of course, is going down to place underwater charges. When they've shifted that bridge, here are another couple to be getting on with. This is another way of doing the job. A barge was sunk at each side of this bridge. Bailey girders were fitted through its members and chocks fitted above them. Then the water was pumped out of the barges and the bridge floated away. Another sapper task connected with waterways is the operation of barges and other waterborne traffic. The units who carry this out are, of course, inland water transport units. The sappers who man the barges mostly worked on the canals and waterways of Britain in peacetime, and they joined the RE as watermen.
Ah, I seem to remember this. It's the Weser, isn't it? Well, they had to divert the river for about a mile into a new bed. The aqueduct was bombed by the RAF and the river was scouring away the foundations of two of the remaining piers. To save them, the river had to be diverted underneath one of the other arches. The job was done by a port construction unit brought up from base. It's another example of the flexibility of our organization. And there's the new channel just before the river was allowed to flow through it.
I expect you remember this too, sir. The demolition of the U-boat pens at Hamburg. I've got quite a bit of demolition material which was taken all over the place.
Oh, I'm glad of that. Demolitions are a most important task. You see, Garland, apart from offensive demolitions, in a withdrawal, it falls to us to delay the enemy, not only by laying mines in his path, but by blowing bridges, cratering roads, wrecking installations, and destroying supply dumps that can't be moved in time.
In this demolition, over 30 tons of explosives were used, mostly captured German bombs. The object was to bring down completely the roofs of all 5 bays in the pens and smash up the inside walls. Most of the concrete is 15 feet thick, by the way, and heavily reinforced. This party is laying the electric cables to the firing point. The OC of the field squadron is going to touch off the demolition at the set time. Senior officers of all services were there to observe the results. You can see for yourself that they were up to expectations. The next scenes were taken in Norway on a commando raid. Here the sapper's task was to destroy supplies and installations. The Norwegians lent a hand. These scorched earth programs are always part of the general plan in a withdrawal. In the Low Countries in France in 1940, and again in Crete and Greece in 1941, sappers had to carry out denial schemes with the barest resources and in the face of the enemy. They were often unaided by other arms of the service and had only their own weapons with which to defend themselves. Well, next we have a short sequence on mine laying in the core area. Several methods are taught in the Army. This one is the pacing method. They are dug into the ground. The safety pin is withdrawn, and the mine is fully armed. All minefields are marked with minefield markers for the benefit of our own troops. These next few shots show dogs being trained for minefield clearance. They were mainly used in Army and LFC areas, where they did an extraordinarily good job in detecting mines. They work more quickly than a man with a mechanical detector, but it takes a long time to train them, and not all dogs are suitable. After a mine has been found, it is marked with one of these white cones, and the dog is rewarded with a titbit.
Hello. I suppose that's Gibraltar, hmm?
Yes, sir. Some sappers working in the galleries there, tunneling into the rock. They're improving and expanding the underground fortifications and installations. All these chaps are highly skilled miners, and most of them learnt their trade in the coalfields at home. Normally, pneumatic tools and other plant are used, but because of the limited size of this gallery, the sappers are using picks and shovels.
Very interesting, John. You know, Garland, I should keep that in the film, if only because the first Sapper Company was formed in Gibraltar about 1770 and was employed on fortifications there. Of course, the Corps was originally formed solely for fortification work. But since then, it has been responsible for many of the technical developments that have taken place in the Army. For example, in the early days, balloons were used for observation purposes.
And we trained with them at Aldershot and Chatham. The old steam road transport, the forerunner of the army lorry, was first used by a sapper company in the South African War.
We flew aeroplanes and formed an air battalion RE before the 1914-1918 war, which became part of the Royal Flying Corps.
We developed the first field telegraph during the Crimean War, and later the divisional signal companies RE, which were made into a separate corps, the Royal Signals. The first tank was designed by a sapper officer way back in 1916. And he led the tanks in their first attack. And the searchlights were RE too, until quite recently. Well, what's next, John?
Well, now we move forward again from Army and Corps area into a divisional area.
There.
Okay, sir?
Mm-hmm.
Now for the division. This was in the Middle East. It shows sappers of a field squadron clearing a way through a minefield to let the infantry and armor through. But the next bit's interesting. It too is about minefield gapping. It starts off by showing Field Marshal Lord Maitland Wilson addressing some of his staff in the Middle East in 1942.
That, gentlemen, is my plan. I wish to impress on you that the whole success of the operation depends on the speed in getting the tanks and guns through the minefield. Unless that is accomplished, the whole impetus of the attack is prejudiced. Now, to get down to more detail, first of all, there must be a thorough and detailed reconnaissance of the area.
The job of the Recce Patrol is to find out where the anti-tank mines are laid and what kind they are. On completion, the patrol commander reports to his OC.
The minefield extends from here to here.
How many belts are there?
4 belts, sir, all telemines and some are booby-trapped.
How about anti-personnel mines?
There are 2 rows of S-mines, some with tripwires and some with prongs in front of each of the first 2 belts.
Any wire?
Yes, there is some old wire in the middle of the field here, which is booby-trapped.
Okay.
And as far as I can say, there are no other anti-personnel mines whatsoever.
After the plan has been made, the OC of the field squadron gives his orders.
Any questions?
No.
You?
No.
Now, Alan, your platoon will be responsible for number 3 gap. That's here, as you know. There aren't many AP mines. The first and most important thing is to get an 8-yard gap right through, so as to get the carriers and anti-tank guns forward. When that's done, start at once to widen the 16-yard gap for the armor and vehicles.
That's good. Keep that in. It stresses the importance of a thorough reconnaissance before an RE task. Before any RE task, in fact.
Now we'll see some normal work in the divisional area. Bridging, water supply, demolitions and roads. This pontoon bridge was built by divisional engineers, and here's a folding boat bridge which was built over the Rhine in March 1945. Mr. Churchill and Field Marshal Montgomery seem to be taking quite an interest in it. It's much lighter than a Bailey and only carries Class 9 loads. The bridge you see here is over the Seine in France. The Canadians made the initial assault crossing, and afterwards their sappers built several Bailey pontoon bridges in extremely short time. These sappers are looking for supplies of water, a perpetual sapper task in the field. If the results of this purification test are satisfactory, the well will be used as a water point. Here's a typical water point in a stream being made ready for divisional troops. This was in France in 1944. The unit water trucks in the background are lining up for water. The sappers who run these water points are required to keep their pumps in really good order and to do regular maintenance too. This railway bridge is being prepared for demolition. The sappers are placing charges against the girders and rails of the bridge. These men are Chindits, who had been dropped behind the Jap lines in Burma to carry out offensive demolitions. Besides this, in a withdrawal, wide belts of demolitions have to be made on river lines and railway systems to hold up the enemy. Now for some more roads. This is the sort of problem which confronts the divisional engineers when a day's rain turns a jeep track in a forward area into a quagmire. In Burma, jeep tracks weren't so easy to find, and here you see one being hewn out of the side of a hill. There's quite a drop on that side, so the dozer driver must have all his wits about him. The divisional engineers also had to do first aid to roads in forward areas, employing heavy plant as often as possible. These scenes were taken in Italy in 1943. And here are sappers clearing anti-tank obstacles, using pneumatic tools. When no plant is available, they have to get on with the job by using picks and shovels, or by hand. Where stone quarries don't exist, they use the rubble from bombed buildings to fill in craters and widen roads. This one's a bit bumpy, but it serves a vital purpose. Now, the last part of the material I've got shows a typical assault. I think it gives a pretty good picture of the work of the divisional engineers. We've seen examples of the everyday tasks, but this next lot of stuff will show a general view of the RE in the assault, bringing in the airborne and armored engineers. It's a typical opposed river crossing, followed by a set-piece attack on prepared defenses on the far side. It shows the work of the breaching teams more or less in sequence, but it has been put together from scenes taken in several similar actions. Still, I think it shows what we want.
Will you explain it as we go, John, for Ronnie's benefit?
Right. It's got sound on it, too.
We intend to use natural sound with a little dialogue here and there, if you'll bear that in mind.
The evening before the attack, the assaulting units move up from their assembly areas to the forming up places. By this time, all commanders have made their plans. All the early reconnaissances have been carried out, and all units have been briefed for the attack. At the forming up places, the various units marry up for the river crossing. These storm boats, by the way, each have a crew of sappers. This party of infantry is forming up on its storm boats. The platoon commander has told them that they'll have some hours to wait, so they take off their equipment. The platoon commander and the RE sergeant in charge of the boat synchronize their watches while the troops rest by their boats. At another forming up place, other infantry are resting by their LVTs, usually called buffaloes. Some buffaloes will only take personnel, but others have a ramp in the bow which will allow a jeep or an anti-tank gun to be carried in the well. Here's an assembly area with lorry loads of folding boat equipment, where it's being kept in readiness for the bridging operation. At an aerodrome far back, the airborne troops are loading up their planes and gliders in readiness for the operation, the airborne sappers among them. The platoon commander and the sergeant have a quick look round to see that all is well with the resting men. A mine recce party is waiting too. There are often long and trying periods of waiting before a bridging operation. Some time before HR, the airborne troops go in. While back on the ground, it's time for them to be on the move too. They get in their buffaloes and move off in the direction of the river. The storm boats are carried forward to the river. rafting begins. The raft commander calls forward the tanks and guides them aboard, making sure they take up a central position on the raft. This is a 50-60 raft built by the armored RE, now called the Assault RE. Here's another tank, a Churchill, coming aboard a raft further downstream. Most of these shots were taken on the Rhine assault in March 1945. These rafts are winched across by mechanical means. At another site, a field squadron is working close support rafts for lighter vehicles. They are driven by these propulsion units. Notice the sapper looking to the commander for hand signals. While all this activity is going on, the construction of a folding boat bridge is well advanced. These sappers are carrying road bearers down to the river's edge in readiness for the next bay. When a bay has been constructed, it's walked along the length of the bridge. Other bays are being built on the bank here. More bays are attached to the head of the bridge. Anchors are dropped up and downstream. The sappers make fast their cables to the boats. Finally, the bridge reaches to the far bank, and it's all ready for the supporting arms going up to the assaulting units. While the bridging operation is going on, reports are constantly coming back to the various RE headquarters. Here, sapper clerks are constantly taking messages from DRs and over telephone, while draftsmen keep the charts and maps up to date. This is but one of the many tasks that are carried out by RE office staffs during operations. After the bridgehead has been well established, there's a build-up until all is ready for the next phase. It's a set-piece attack on a heavily defended position. There go the Sherman flails. The earlier flail tanks were operated by sappers, but these have RAC crews. They flog a clear path with their chains for the armor and infantry that will follow. The infantry start moving up. The flails go right up to the anti-tank ditch and then move back a bit so that the rest of the armor can pass them. Here are two half-troops of Avers. Remember, they're assault vehicles RE. One half-troop has two fascines mounted and the other an assault bridge and a fascine. These fascines are made up of 30 or 40 rolls of chestnut paling, are 7 or 8 feet in diameter and weigh about 3 tons. The other half-troop has got up to the ditch, and there goes the small box girder assault bridge. It's about 35 feet long and will bridge a gap of up to 28 feet. Avery's gun tanks and Crocodile flame-throwing tanks then go straight over these two crossings and make for the pillboxes on the far side. Troop leader of the Avers. He's going in to have a bash at the pillbox with his petard. petard's that short kind of gun you see on the turret of the Avery. It's actually a spigot mortar which fires a special demolition charge called a flying dustbin. Through the flames go the infantry, right onto the objective. The battle moves on again, while sappers of the divisional RE check and mark the lanes cleared by the flails.
Well, thank you very much, John. Well, gentlemen, that's the sort of film we want. It certainly puts the RE on the screen, all right.
Yes, it's just the kind of thing we had in mind. And what's more, it's real.
It's excellent material. In fact, there doesn't seem to be very much for me to do, apart from a little editing, putting on the commentary and giving it a title. By the way, have you any ideas for a title? Title? Yes. A film about military engineering. That's Sapper Tasks. Of course, that's it. Sapper Tasks. You begin your play in music over the Royal Engineer badge, and then the words, military training film supervised by an officer.